Hello, and welcome to Once More with Feeling, Cry Pretty, the newest album from Carrie Underwood. Joining me once again this week is...
AskaLuna, hey!
So, yeah, because I've started to actually get things organised, we're going to see a bit more of a rotation with my co-hosts. And AskaLuna suggested this. I've never listened to Carrie Underwood before, so I thought, why not expand my pool of artists I've listened to and experience something different. As such, you take it away.
Carrie Underwood, it's all the kind of core country music back in like the 90s kind of days, all the way up to now, which is much more kind of country pop. Obviously, she hasn't been around since the 90s. It has been, like, her first album, I think, was 2005.
Let's see. Yes.
Because she was, I believe she was on American Idol, which obviously, when it first started, was most people's rise to fame at that point in time. But yeah, I've enjoyed most of her music for quite a few years. This album is an interesting one.
I mean, I really wasn't sure what to expect, so... I mean, when you said country pop, I think I had something a bit different in mind. Like, I won't lie, I was a bit worried because of what the recent country pop landscape has been like.
Yeah, I mean, her kind of country pop isn't the standard. She's not going to be like your Taylor Swift country pop, which I think is what most people jump to.
Yeah. I wasn't thinking Taylor Swift style, I was more thinking Florida Georgia Line, that sort of style, and I was sort of like, okay,
yeah,
worried.
Music from Carrie is usually pretty decent, so I thought it'd be a good one to review. And yeah, I mean, I've listened to the full album now and can say it's pretty solid.
Yeah. It's very rare for me to encounter an album like this. I suppose it falls into the same vein as when I listened to Anastasia and Christina Aguilera's last albums, where it's sort of like artists I'd never listened to before and was really impressed when I did listen to those albums. It falls into that same vein.
Yeah, but that's pretty awesome. Like, it's sometimes hard to get out of the funk of this is my type of music that I enjoy and listening to only that genre. And I think this album in particular is a pretty good break into some country music.
Yeah.
For a lot of people. It's done really, really well sales wise. Like in the US and Canada, it held number one.
Yeah.
For quite a while.
Interestingly enough, it's actually outsold Cardi B's debut album, which is one of those. What?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think it's currently sat around 16 in the charts of the UK.
Let's have a look. Well, peak position has been 16 over here, which isn't bad.
Not considering that she's not like a major voice to the UK scene, but it's really nice to see it up there.
Peak position in Australia, Canada, UK country albums, US Billboard 200, and US top country albums. Yeah, all number ones.
Yeah, so she's done exceptionally well with this one.
And I've got a few songs that I'd say are sort of standouts for me. What key tracks would you say are standouts for you?
I think my favourites are Cry Pretty, which is obviously the title of the album. And it's the opening track, so it opens really, really strong. And then End Up With You, I absolutely adore. Like that's right up there. It's a really, really catchy one. And then I think Spinning Bottles is up there.
Yeah, that was an interesting one because it's very... When I first saw the title, I was sort of like, okay, we've already had one sort of party time type track, which is Southbound. So when I saw the title, I was sort of like, is this going to be another party track? But no! You would not play this at a party.
No, not at all.
It's quite interesting to encounter a song that's actually discussing sort of the relation between depression and alcoholism.
Yeah.
Like, you will encounter songs that talk about alcoholism and the damaging effects of it, but you will rarely encounter one that's expressly saying that it can be as a consequence of a deep depression.
Yeah, I mean, as one of the great things about the lyrics for a lot of the songs, there's a lot of much deeper kind of motivation behind them.
Yeah.
Sometimes with quite chirpy sounding music, which is really intriguing.
One of the standouts for me, one of the personal favourites, and probably says a lot about my current mental state, is Drinking Alone. Kind of a amusing talking about spinning bottles and then saying about drinking alone.
Is oddly apt, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that kind of stood out to me for a few reasons. I wasn't expecting it because I was sort of like, okay, I'm used to this being a sort of country pop type album, and then you get this sort of very R&B style song.
Yeah, I wasn't entirely sure where that came from, but it was an interesting addition for
Yeah.
sure.
I mean, when I say R&B, I'm talking rhythm and blues, not rhythm and bass, which is what.
Yeah,
And I was just sort of like, okay, wasn't expecting this. I'm not complaining because I like rhythm and blues, but I wasn't expecting this. And how it relates the whole concept of, I mean, notes here say about it being sort of about finding someone to drink your sorrows away with and possibly making an enjoyable mistake with as a consequence.
yeah,
I mean, that's the impression that I got. Maybe that's just my own personal reading into it. It's always difficult to say with songs like this.
yeah. I mean, like the arrangement of the songs on the album feel like a proper journey.
Yeah.
Like the breakup towards the start, the real kind of sadness and isolation towards the middle,
Mm.
and then you've got the kind of potentially making back up kind of theme with love wins and end up with you
Mm.
towards the end, which is really interesting for a structure.
Yeah. And to reflect on other albums that supposedly had a story to tell, it's a much better structure presented here than was presented in Attention Attention by Shinedown, where the message felt very muddied and you couldn't really tell what was going on. Whereas here, I'm able to go song by song. Yes, this is a specific emotional, social journey that the singer is going on. This does actually feel, for all intents and purposes, like a form of concept album. Not necessarily a high concept album, but sort of a social concept album.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Now, admittedly, there are a couple of songs that both of us are sort of like, eh,
Yeah,
they're all
there's
right.
always a couple on an album. You're gonna guarantee to find some, but these were kind of left field for me.
I mean, The Bullet, I found myself listening through and just going, it's kind of there. It's not much really, either lyrically or musically. It kind of feels a bit like You Give Love a Bad Name by Bon Jovi,
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely see that.
but much less impactful.
Yeah. I mean, you could literally remove it from the playlist and it wouldn't make too much of a difference to the structure of the album.
Yeah. Kingdom, I'm in two minds about that because on the one hand it did feel very meh for me, but on the other hand it did feel necessary.
It felt necessary. It's not one that you could remove, for sure. But right now, I'm like, don't really care for it. But it does feel like a track that could grow on you over time if you were to listen to the album a few more times.
Yeah.
It might feel a little bit less out there and a little less meh.
I mean, at the moment it's just like, here's the thing, none of the songs on this album, even the ones that I'm not especially a fan of, none of them I would actively go, skip it. But at the same time, I feel that the two that we've outlined. Could have done with a bit more TLC.
Yeah, for sure.
The one song that stood out as a is admittedly a bonus track.
Yeah, like the champion, which is the bonus track, is, an added extra.
Yeah.
So it's nothing that I really felt affected it too much.
Yeah. I mean, I did like the champion. For me, it felt like a better closer than Kingdom in terms of on the part of Carrie Underwood. I don't really know if the rap verse was necessary.
That is the only thing about it that threw me. Like, that is the only part of it that was just like, hang on, what? You know how when we were reviewing the last Pink album,
Yeah.
We had the Eminem track in there.
Yeah.
It feels like that to me.
Yeah. And just for the people at home, the rap verse is performed by Ludacris. So it's one of those, you've got this very heavily country pop album, and then suddenly the bonus track featuring Ludacris, this, big name in the rap scene, and it's all like, what just happened?
Yep. Literally. It is just like, hang on, what am I listening to now? Have I changed album? It's odd, because if you could remove the Ludacris stuff, it'd be a fantastic track, but it just kind of ruins it for me personally.
I mean, it doesn't ruin it for me, it's just, it's so out of left field, I'm just thinking, how did we get here?
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that.
You kind of feel like Desmond the Moon Bear. How did I get here? That's quite literally the end.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I actually thoroughly enjoyed it on the second listen through. Like, there's a lot of emotion in some of the songs. Not as much emotion as I'd say some of her previous works have had to them.
Yeah.
But I'll be really interesting to see as well what she does with the album single-wise and video-wise, because a lot of her tracks had a lot really powerful music videos in the past.
I mean, one that I'd be very intrigued to see what she'd do video-wise would be Backsliding. Won't lie, that felt like... in my notes I've got written, did someone order a side of Too Close to Home?
Yeah, it's also, like, it is actually the longest song on the album.
Oh yeah, I didn't... That's a good point.
Yeah, it's 4 minutes 38, which is the longest by, like, 20 seconds?
Actually...
No, Kingdom is just behind by 4 seconds.
But it really was one of those... Okay, this is hitting me in rather emotional places.
Yeah.
Like, because that's all the whole reflecting on the need to move on and why things ended with someone, and also how you can end up slipping back into feeling emotions for that person and kind of wanting to just bang your head on a table as you try to get those thoughts and feelings out of yourself.
Yeah, that is a little close to home, and I imagine it's probably quite close to home for a fair few people. It does feel like a breakup album.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Scripts Break Even album.
Yeah.
Right? It's one of those things that you will either listen to after a breakup because it helps you release those emotions, or you'll listen to after a breakup and it'll just remind you.
Yeah, I mean, I remember describing to a couple of friends that it was kind of having the drunk phone call or drunk text effect on me, whereas I did actually have to take a break because I was teetering on the at risk of sending my ex a text.
Oh no. I mean, that is kind of a sentiment in itself, like, as to how powerful some of the lyrics in Carrie Underwood's music can be.
Yeah.
Which is quite interesting and quite unusual for artists these days. So, it's definitely a plus.
Yeah. I'm just thinking through. I mean, before we started recording, I was considering going through this track by track, but it's kind of the album that you need to experience firsthand to really understand what we're getting at.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like, it is an experience, and you really do need to listen from start to finish, and not just listen to the music, but listen to the lyrics.
It's quite interesting when you go into some of the songs that sound lighter. Like, whilst Drinking Alone has quite a heavy lyrical meaning, it's a lot more upbeat in terms of music.
Yeah.
It kind of has a bit of a Shakespearean play structure in that sense, in that Southbound comes right after Backsliding, and that placement feels necessary just to bring a bit of levity to the album.
Yeah.
And Drinking Alone is right after that song that we used to make love to. And again, it feels a bit like levity is being brought to the album, which I think that's another reason why Kingdom feels a bit meh for me, because I feel like that could have done with sounding a bit more triumphant, I suppose.
Yeah.
But overall, really enjoyed the album. What score would you give it out of 5?
It's a tough one, you see, because while I find it as an unusual album for Carrie Underwood, it was still really good in the end. Just a bit like, I think I definitely need to listen to it a couple more times. So currently, I think it'd be kind of mid-range 3 out of 5.
Okay.
Possibly going up to a 4 out of 5 if I listen to it a few more times.
On my part, it's sort of averaging it out is sort of like, there was 2 songs that I'm not especially keen on. One which I'm Love Wins didn't do too much for me personally, but that's personal preference. So if we sort of average it out, as it's a 13-track album, and I enjoyed 10 of those, so it's sort of squarely in the 4 out of 5 for me.
Cool. So we're not far off. It's definitely a good album. Like, I would definitely recommend it to people. So
Yeah.
As I said, I just need to listen to it again, and I'll probably bump it up to a 4 out of 5 quite easily.
Fair enough. I would definitely recommend it to people who aren't especially into country. With all the various albums I've reviewed in the past, the majority of them being metal related, this is the very first pure country album that I've ever covered, and I'd happily recommend it to anyone who's willing to give new stuff a try. And I would definitely say, fans of Carrie Underwood, if you've not listened to this yet, it's been out for a couple of weeks, but even so, if you've not listened to it yet, definitely pick it up.
Yeah, it's absolutely worth picking up. Support her, because it is powerful music. It's a great album, and if you're not into country music, this is a really good kind of middle ground.
Yeah, I think it's because it doesn't have too much of the country sound, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it eases you in a lot more. I suppose that's all we really have left to say, is go out and buy it.
Yeah. Go do the thing, guys.
Most likely the next episode is going to be the inaugural episode of We Meant to Review This Honest, covering the Mighty Mighty Boss Stones while we're at it. Aside from that, no idea what's next. Your guess is as good as ours.
And you can always, if you have an album to recommend that we listen to, post it down below. Country, J-pop, whatever you fancy.
Yeah.
And we'll check it out.
Yeah, we'll check out everything. Have yet to cover a dubstep album, so if you've got a dubstep album to recommend, go for it.
That would definitely be interesting.
Yeah, so that's it for this episode, and remember, try not to drink alone unless you're together.
Aww. This statement makes me kind of sad. It's good advice, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
We should be drinking alone.